What is going on, everyone? Phil here for KO Gaming, and welcome to my first impressions for Dark Souls 3. I've actually had the privilege and luck to be able to play this game a few weeks earlier than its official United States release, which is coming up on April 12th, 2016. And ever since I started playing, I've been bombarded with questions from viewers about what do I think about the game? Is it better or worse than other games from Software? What do I like? What do I dislike? Etc. Rather than really jump the gun, I decided to hold in all of my thoughts until I finally felt that I had enough gameplay of the game to formulate a really valid opinion, so here it comes. Before we get started, minor spoiler alert. I'm not going to spoil any kind of big style boss fights or critical plot points or anything like that, but in these videos you're going to see references to returning characters, you're going to see some of the enemy types, so if you absolutely don't want to be spoiled whatsoever on Dark Souls 3, obviously don't watch this first impressions video. Now, for any other game, you might say, 12 and a half hours of gameplay for a first impressions video? Isn't that a little bit far into the game? The answer here, honestly, is no. I'm only about, from all calculations and reports, a third into the game at this point. And so for a game that's going to be around 30 hours long, playing around 12 and a half hours actually is a good, sufficient amount to formulate a first impressions opinion. So here we go with what I think. First off, the graphics of Dark Souls 3 are pretty much exactly on par with what you saw with Bloodborne. You know, both of these games being on modern consoles. Dark Souls 2 previously was only on the last gen. You're going to get improved visuals, you're going to have a steady 30 frames per second frame rate with a dip here or there, just like you had with the previous games. Don't expect any kind of groundbreaking leaps in visuals or anything like that. It's pretty much on par with how Bloodborne performed last year, and I'm okay with that. In addition, don't expect Dark Souls 3 to go breaking any molds or anything of the sort. It's going to be more par for the course of that grueling From Software difficult gameplay that you're used to. Enemies are going to come out of everywhere, they're going to gangbang you, they're going to do tons of damage, and you're basically going to die a lot. There's a lot of situations and traps that lead to hilarious outcomes, at least if you don't get super furious every time you die, because yes, just like every other Dark Souls game and Bloodborne, you're going to die a lot when you play Dark Souls 3. You'll be going from bonfire to bonfire, different locations, you'll be running into bosses that are big epic fights, you'll have areas with mini bosses that almost seem like previous bosses you've fought. There's all kinds of stuff in this game that exactly what you would expect from the previous Dark Souls experiences, and by the way, that's a good thing. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Initially, when I started playing Dark Souls 3, I almost thought it was Bloodborne, so I was dodging a lot more and I wasn't using my shield to block, and it actually took probably around 6 to 8 hours of gameplay for me to realize this is not Bloodborne, this is Dark Souls. You can be more defensive, it's not about actively having to dodge through everything. Although a lot of people have made the comparison and said, gee, doesn't it seem that the gameplay here has sped up? And the answer to that is yeah, significantly. In previous Dark Souls games, a lot of the times the characters and enemies were a lot slower. In this game, it seems like things have been sped up a bit to make the combat a little bit more fast-paced. And again, it's cool because it does draw a lot of parallels to Bloodborne in that regard. Now, the major new addition to the game, the weapon abilities, I'll be honest with everyone, I haven't used them. In 12 and a half hours of gameplay, I've played the game my own style. I really have not utilized any of the weapon's unique abilities whatsoever. So in that regard, I couldn't even give you a valid opinion and say, oh, this weapon's ability is crazy good and this one isn't. Because honestly, just kind of doing melee attacks and blocking and dodging around has been enough, at least so far, to defeat everything that I've come up against. Now, I do a lot more of a defensive style gameplay than a lot of people. A lot of enemies I tend to try to avoid when I first meet them, or find little game kind of exploits like getting them stuck in a door or something in order to kind of cheaply whack them out. But hey, it works, and whatever works, works. So I'm certainly not the person to be asking about the new game mechanic. I know it's there, but I really haven't used it. The cool thing I'm realizing about Dark Souls 3 the more that I play is that it is directly tied into the plotline of Dark Souls 1. In fact, there are characters in this game like the Blacksmith who are the exact same characters from Dark Souls 1, and it's cool to see game mechanics, characters, and lore kind of return and tie into everything. As I've been playing, people in stream chat are going crazy. Oh my god, did you see this character? Oh, he ran into the crow. Oh, he ran into this. And it's pretty cool to have those connections to Dark Dark Souls 1, and, you know, I appreciate it, and definitely if you are a longtime fan of the game, you're going to enjoy it a heck of a lot more. I'm sure there's dozens of things that I've completely missed, being that it's been 6 years since I really played Dark Souls 1. I'm sure people who are hardcore fans of the series are going to notice a lot more than I did. Now, I'm going to be really honest with all of you. Within the first 6 hours of gameplay of Dark Souls 3, I really wasn't very impressed. I thought that it was slow moving, and quite honestly, I thought that the game design and the enemy design was too similar to Bloodborne. It would have been something if Bloodborne had come out a few years ago, but it's fresh in our minds from only a year ago. And to see enemies that literally look like they could have been copy and pasted from that game, including dogs and other enemies that have almost like hound-like movements when that was such a big enemy class in Bloodborne, is kind of disappointing. Crazy townspeople, how many of those did we fight in Bloodborne? And here they are yet again, almost identical to how they looked in that game. So I wonder what they were thinking with the early game design. Almost maybe I'm thinking it was a bait and switch, and the reason I say that is because my second 6 hours of gameplay in Bloodborne really opened up, and we saw a wider variety of enemies, a wider range of locales. The game is really starting to get very interesting with what they're throwing at me, and I'm liking it a lot more now that I'm further into the game. So maybe From Software almost purposely wanted to tease everyone and say, hey, remember Bloodborne last year? Well, that's the slow intro part, but now we're going to throw you right hardcore into the varied, diversified, and terrifying world of Dark Souls once you get that little bit of a taste as an appetizer. So maybe that's exactly what they did. I don't know, but I am getting happier and liking the game more the further into it that I get. So in summary, Dark Souls 3 is very similar to the previous Dark Souls games. If anything, it even seems more similar to Dark Souls 1 because of some of the connections in the lore, the locations, and returning characters. The first few hours of the game, quite honestly, were slow moving and a little boring. After that, the game got a lot more varied, has opened up, has picked up. There's now various different ways that I can go to complete it, and I'm actually liking it a heck of a lot more. Just like the previous Souls games and Bloodborne last year, the more I play Dark Souls 3, the more it grows on me, and I want to keep playing it, even though I'm dying to cheap traps and tricky situations that From Software has set up. I'm not getting sour about it. I'm enjoying every minute of it, and by the way, bonfires seem to be plentiful enough that you don't really have to replay a ridiculous amount of gameplay if you do happen to die after an extended run, and that's a good thing. So for now, I'm really enjoying Dark Souls 3. I know that many of you have stayed away from watching my playthrough because you don't want the game spoiled for you until you get to play it on April 12th, and that's perfectly fine. But I will be playing it more over the next couple of weeks, and I certainly hope that you'll join me for my streams and my on-demand videos over on DSP Gaming, and I'm looking forward to finishing the game and giving you a full-fledged review somewhere down the line. That's it for my impressions on Dark Souls 3. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please check the description. First off, you'll find a link to my ongoing playthrough of the game over on DSP Gaming. You'll also find our Amazon Associates link. And lastly, please check out patreon.com/DarksidePhil. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you later.